Feminine Roadmappers. Welcome back to Feminine Roadmap Podcast, the podcast that helps you navigate the challenges and changes of midlife and to live a more vibrant second half. If you're finding me today on YouTube, please remember to subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss any of these inspiring conversations. If you're on the podcast platforms, please subscribe, rate, and share Feminine Roadmap so we can reach more and more women with these stories of encouragement and these strategies to live a more vibrant life. Today, I have a special treat for you. My guest today is 81-year-old Gina Peelen. Jean lives in a tiny house community, and she has lived an amazing life. She is the co-author of 2 books of being over 50. One is Invisible No More, The Secret Lives of Women Over 50, and Saving the Best for Last, Creating Our Lives After 50. She has also created a Facebook group and a website called Old Women Who Write. Jean, thank you so much for being with me today.
You're so welcome. I'm really pleased to be here, and I'm really pleased at what you're doing, at your mission.
Thank you. You know, we women need to encourage one another that life is not over at a certain age, is it?
Oh, no, not at all.
So why don't we have you share a little bit about yourself? What has your journey been since you wrote those books, since you hit that magical age of 50 where we're supposed to get quiet and kind of slowly ride off into the sunset?
And get invisible. That's right. That's right. That started out when in our late 50s, 2 friends and I would get together all the time. And one day one of them said, I was at the makeup counter at Macy's and I was waiting to be waited on. And she said, and the young woman waiting on me never saw me. Saw the woman on my right, who was much younger, the woman on my left. And it was like I was invisible. And it hit such a chord that something happens after 50. And I know what the something is. I mean, if you look at the science and the biology, we become less attractive in the world as baby makers, as, advertising material. So we become much less visible to the rest of the world. So it really struck a nerve. And I started looking for literature out there about older women. I'm calling it older. It's midlife really, but I'm calling it older women. And there was nothing out there. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of books about geriatrics, what to do with the really old people like me, what to do with them. But there was sort of nothing about that midlife over 50 age. And so I got together with my friends and I showed them, I'd gotten all these books out of the library. I said, look. Does any of that look like you? Like our lives? And they said, no. So I said, then we've got to write about what we experience about being over 50. So the book we wrote, Invisible, both of them, the books are available still on Amazon. These are now almost 20 years old, but they're available for probably $1.50 used. But we started writing about our experiences, whether it was about spirituality, money, sex, family, our legacy. We just started writing. And it was a wonderful experience. It really was. Just the writing of it was the first time we had put any of our own emotions into words about the stage of life we were at. So it was great. And we had fun when it was published. I mean, we spoke to women all over. Anywhere they would have us, we would go and speak, whether it was libraries, bookstores, women's clubs, the Democratic Women's Club, the Republican Women's Club. It didn't matter, right? We spoke everywhere that would invite us about this phenomenon. And then AARP heard about us, and they had us come to their national conference and speak about this topic. So we got a little traction, but what I saw also is that we were sort of early for our time. Nobody was interested in very much in the topic. And it wasn't until the baby boomers really came into their own that
Mhm.
people started writing and thinking about, man, what do we do? You know, the average age in the turn of the century, 1900, that turn, the average age for women, if I remember right, was about, oh, I'm forgotten this exactly, but it was about 50. I mean,
Mm.
women died in childbirth at a great rate. So, and now our average rate is in the 80s. So we have, you know, an additional 30, 40 years
Yeah.
beyond the point where we've gotten married, if we did that, had children, if we did that, saw them off to high school, saw them off to college. We have another 20, 30, 40 years to live on this earth. You know, and I think it's a serious question for every woman, whether they ever got married, didn't get married, whatever your status in life, to think about, what do I want to do for the rest of my life?
Yes. Yes. You know, it's interesting, Jean, because I have been in the beauty industry for many years. I've been a makeup artist for over 30.
Huh?
And it's fascinating because as a woman who aged into the beauty industry as well, I didn't start officially. I've been a makeup artist for probably 7 years before I got into the retail side. And as I matured into that industry and became one of the older ladies, uh, I found that women were so excited to have me at the counter.
Oh, yeah,
They're
absolutely.
like, you look like me. Oh my gosh, somebody who's my age or close to it,
Right.
you know. My clientele really built strong above a certain age.
Yes.
And it's
That,
really fascinating. You're right. There is I think there's two parts. I think we have a culture that has divided us the way they do in public school by age. We've grown up being separated by age.
yes.
And so people some people still stick with that reality that, oh, you're not in my age group, right?
Mhm.
There's lines in the sand to, you know, how you can quote relate to someone. And we're just human beings on this earth. The age is how long we've been here, but we have so much to offer and share with each other intergenerationally. And in that beauty thing, women would say they'd start to panic about turning 50. And I would have these conversations about, okay, let's think about this. To your point, Jean, women are going to live potentially into their 80s,
Yes.
and you're going to panic at 45.
Yep.
Are you
Exactly.
going to panic for 50 years? Like, is this your plan? Or 40 years? Or are you going to recognize that just live your life and find that next iteration of yourself? It's
Yes.
fascinating because I was in the beauty industry. So what your friend experienced, I kind of experienced on both sides. It,
Yes. That makes
mm-hmm,
sense.
mm-hmm,
You know, speaking of that, the industry that, or the industry that's around looks, um, when I retired at age like 59, and I didn't know what I wanted to do next. I wanted to do something different, something really exciting. And my last day in office, I was packing up my office and I had a little TV in the office, and a commercial came on that said, "So you want to be a model?" And I thought, what? 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 And it was some semi scam about, you know, coming to a hotel somewhere where
yeah.
you walk in front of a panel of judges. Well, I walked out of my office and said to the first three people I met, I've decided to become a model, because that's how I operate. I just declare what I want next with no evidence whatsoever that it can happen. And I went on, I went to that contest. I got and met agents from New York City. I was living in Washington, D.C. at the time. Um, Agents from D.C., Los Angeles, from all over. And I got to meet them. And then I got to follow up by saying, I'd love to have a meeting with you to see, to get your advice on how to break in at my age to the modeling industry. Well, I ended up in the modeling industry at age 59, you know, and I modeled for the next like 10 years for commercials, for photo shoots, for at that too, QVC.
Yes.
And then I moved to Florida for HSN, Home Shopping Network. And it was fabulous because, my dream at 20 would have been, I'd like to just go somewhere and have them do my makeup, do my hair, say, oh, this looks good on her. Let's put her in this. And then say, smile for the camera. And then they hand me money. And I really brought all that out just to say that's sort of how I've lived most of my life, but particularly after 50, I saw it as a time that I was free. My kids were up and out, it was my time to experiment, to try something I never would have thought of before. I never would have thought of writing a book. I never would have thought of becoming a model. I never would have thought of, I retired at least 4 times. I retired from the federal government. I retired from modeling. I moved to Florida. I ran for public office, and served as a city commissioner for 6 years, just because we are so free at this age. We are so free to be whoever we want to be. We fulfilled societal expectations for us already.
Right. We have lived the roles we're expected to live.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's really how I see it. And let me tell you, it continues through the 80s. At least I'm 81. I've just completed a memoir, a book by myself, no co-authors. That is 60 little minutes in my life that created my life. That's what the book is. And it's not published yet. I just got a publisher, so who knows? I won't even give you a title because it'll probably change.
Yes.
Before it comes out. But I really do see life as an adventure. Just an adventure. It's so trite to say things like, well, we only have one life to live, or we only go around once, but it's fact. It's fact. And my goal always is to live every day with joy and excitement. That's, what else is there? I mean, love is underneath all of this. Understand when I say that?
Yeah.
The feelings of love and being loved by people you value, whether they're your relatives or your friends or your kids or your parents. It's also an age where we're preparing, when we're talking about 50s and 60s, where I think we're preparing for the death of our parents, for any issues that come up with adult children. So there's also a preparation period in there. I don't know how to explain it. I haven't really defined it in my mind, but I see it. It's like we're gathering strength to deal with whatever is going to come up, because we know it's coming up, because our parents are aging or aged or dying. Our children get into trouble with addiction or with marriage or with
whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
That's right.
I, of course, Jean, you catch me at a moment where I'm in that season of life.
Are you?
My children are stable, but I had my father-in-law died suddenly a few years ago, and we were kind of thrown into caring for my mother-in-law, who we believe had Asperger's. We always knew she was kind of different, but once that realization hit me, which was just before my father-in-law died, it informed how I would engage with her over the time. I think it was 3 years until she passed, but I was the primary decision maker. My husband was doing the finances, but I was taking care of all of the medical, and so legally I was making a lot of decisions. And strength, you mentioned strength, building up strength. I resonate with that.
Yes.
It takes, you've done a lot up until this point in life, and then you think, let me put it that way, I felt like, okay, I left the beauty industry, the retail beauty industry, around 50 for different reasons. And I started to build a business and started to think, okay, now I can move to this next phase of what I want to do with my life and my career. And then everything went off the rails, and I was frustrated with that.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of us in this season of life feel like, oh, it's my time. But you're right, Jean. It's we're not done yet. We're shifting, right? We're transitioning, but there is this moment of time, 10, 15 years, where we're still tethered to someone needing us
Yes.
on a level that kind of limits to some degree if we're going to be really involved.
It does limit it, but I didn't think we'd ever be talking about this subject. But what I discovered is my mother and my grandmother both had Alzheimer's. So I'm very aware of that
Yes.
issue. And when my mother did, and I would go fly from Washington, D.C. to Florida, where they lived every month, and go spend 3-4 days there. And so I wasn't the primary caregiver, she was in a residence, but she didn't know me anymore pretty much, but she just knew she loved me. And one of the things I discovered about, I could have viewed that as, oh, it's such an interruption in my life and I have to sacrifice because I love my mother. What really happened is that I experienced a mother's love in the way I never had before.
Really?
She, probably because of her Alzheimer's and her fading memory, was so clear about that all she wanted to do was love me.
Wow.
And I had never had that. I had issues. My mother was controlling. My mother was critical. When that happened, and I knew that of the three of us, my two sisters and I was the lucky one. That I got to be with her in that sort of golden period, which nobody else would call Alzheimer's a golden period. And, it wasn't a golden period for her.
Right.
But in terms of my relationship with her, it was a golden period. So there, yeah, we have those obligations yet to live through. But I found a side of it that was nourishing.
Yeah.
For me.
That's such a beautiful example. I think not everyone has the blessing of that. I think what was unique for me is I had never had that kind of relationship with my mother-in-law. No one had, because of that Asperger's. Connection was not part of the conversation.
Right.
But I did find for the first time in many years, I've been around since I was 18, we navigated to where she trusted me and I was her person. And, to the point of all we've done to this season of our life, I want to pivot a little bit to recognizing all of the skills and abilities that we bring to this season of life. Like my ability to navigate the medical system and hospice and, paperwork and advocating for medical care was because I've lived this whole life. So when women hit this age and feel confused, it's like, make a list of your skill sets. We have gathered some serious abilities over the years, which enables us to, like you said, we've been gathering strength. We are powerhouse women. We have literally carried the world in our universe, right? Have we not? Yes. Why are we afraid to move forward when we have literally carried the world on our shoulders?
Right. It's absolutely true. Absolutely true.
How many great things could you navigate after 50, Jean? Because you'd either experienced something, you'd learned about it, you'd had something in your life touch you that gave you that information to be courageous.
And also because I reached a point where I was no longer as concerned about the opinions of others. So I wasn't worried about fitting in. I wasn't worried about, what people will think of me if I do X. There's something about being over 50. That's another gift of being over 50. That is, it matters ideally, maybe not for everybody, but it matters less and less and less. I told you before we started the interview that I live in a tiny house village in western North Carolina mountains, and it's heavily populated by women over 50. It's very interesting. There are couples that live here also, but heavily populated by women. Different environment, because what I see is what we've just been talking about. These women have shed, the facades.
Yeah.
They have shed the images that they thought were so important at 40 and 30 and 20. And so they're leading a different life, and our conversations are different than they would have been, I think, in our 40s or 30s. They're more real. They're more direct. I mean, nobody goes around being offensive or insulting, but they're more, you don't spend as much time in fluff.
Yeah. Yeah.
You talk.
I joke about that. I'm like, I've hit this wall where I'm like, no, I'm not interested. Like, it's much, I've always had that personality, but it's almost like I've lost the ability to put up with, like, my patience with certain things.
Yes.
Has completely disappeared.
Yes.
I think that's a very true fact, isn't it? There's something about the beauty of getting beyond that point.
Yeah.
Where it matters what other people think. Because honestly, in reality, people aren't really thinking about us.
Right.
It's just in the moment, the words that they say,
right.
or, things that they do. But let's talk a little bit about what are the gems that you have found at hitting 50 and beyond? I mean, you're 81 now. So over those, say, 30 years, what has been incredible about the second half of your life?
I think I always had a theory that from when I was 10 years old, it waxed and waned at times during my life, but it was my underlying theory that I could do anything I wanted to do. I had some sort of mission here. Didn't know what it was, had no idea, but I had some sort of mission. And the ages there were lots of bumps. Like I said, I got married, I had babies, you get consumed by this. But at 35, I decided to go to law school out of nowhere. And I went, and became a civil rights lawyer. Well, the theory continued to be true. And I feel as though it has been proven so many times. The theory being, I can declare anything, almost anything. I can't declare, I'm going to have a sex change tomorrow, because I'm probably not. But I can declare anything and commit to it and take action. And things will happen. Now, it doesn't always mean that what I want or what I declare comes to fruition. But what it does mean is that along the way, I learn so much and grow so much, and maybe find an alternate path appears that's even better. But first comes the commitment, without having a clue. I mean, when I decided to be a model, I didn't have a clue how to do that. And I needed to declare it publicly, because I work better if I have to live up to what I told someone I was going to do. I need some external forces on me. But that's become more and more. When I decided, I was living in Washington, D.C. As I said, I retired there. We wrote the books there. And then I decided I had never lived near water. And I was going to live near water, period. And so somebody told me about this lovely little island off the west coast of Florida. And I moved there. I knew not a soul, nothing about the place. I just moved there. I visited it once before I moved there. I did the same with this. After 10 years living by the water, which is very healing way to live. I decided I had never lived near mountains, and I wanted to know what that was like. So, and I knew I wanted to live smaller. I wanted to have a smaller footprint in the world. So I just started searching for tiny house communities in in North Carolina, and there I found it. But it's the opposite of how most people approach things. Let's reason out what I want to do. I dream what I want to do. I just dream it, as doesn't matter what it is. Let's figure out what I want to do. Let's figure out the pros and the cons. Let's figure out whatever. And then let's decide. This is where most people drop their dreams. Let's decide if it's feasible. It's not feasible. If I don't see that if I don't see how it can be done, I'm not going to do it. That's where I think that the dividing line is. I go ahead with no, no anything, no promise, no proof, no evidence, nothing. And I said, I'm sure I've failed a lot of times, but nothing has ever felt like failure.
I love that. You're sure you failed, but nothing felt like failure. So why did it not feel like failure, Jean? What makes you see it that way?
I think it's because I knew I committed myself 100%. Here's one thing. I was trying to decide, I was in a civil rights lawyer work for 20 something years for the federal government. And then I got offered a big job. Had nothing to do with lawyering, had nothing to do with civil rights. It was to be, the chief of staff of a broadcasting agency, international, government, international. And I was blown away because I felt very not secure about it. I had, I'd never done any of this kind of work, but I wanted it. I really knew that I would love to do this. It involved a lot of travel, international. I would love to do this. So I called a friend who said, because he was a left brain kind of guy. And I said, so I have done the pros and the cons of taking this job. I know it's this and this, and I don't know what to do. And I'm scared to death. I didn't want to tell him I was scared to death. I was scared to death that I was not up to the job. Yeah. And he listened, then he said, listen, put the two choices on a board in front of you, write them out, put them on pieces of paper. He said, stand back and take a dart and throw it. He said, because the choices were stay in the job I was in, which represents security, experience, expertise, or this unknown huge quantity. He said, whichever way it hits will be the right one. He said, because you'll put your full energies behind it. And that's the difference, I think. Mm-hmm. When I put my full energies behind it, whether or not, I hated that job, by the way. I got it. I took it. I hated it, but it was a very political kind of job. You had a lot of political masters to follow, and I'm not very good at that. But it introduced me to a much larger world than I had been inhabiting in Washington, D.C. I met people from all over the world. I got to travel. I got to learn about what international broadcasting was. What was the Voice of America? What was Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, Radio Free China, radio and TV to Cuba? I got so much learning from it. So I say the failures are never failures. They're just not.
The failure is a frame of mind.
Yeah. It is.
So you're
really funny because when I'm talking, I feel like I'm selling snake oil, something, and I don't mean to be. I just get excited when I talk about ways to live life. I did way back in the 90s, not 1890s, 1990s. I did a workshop, so a transformational workshop, and written on the board or on a bulletin board or somewhere, it said, I am the sole, comma, uncontested author of my life. And that just sunk into me. I am the sole uncontested author of my life. That is such a responsible statement to make. It is such an inspiring statement to me. You know, it is such a no excuses statement. You know, not, well, I don't have enough money, or I don't have enough time, or I don't see that I can do that. I've never done that before. None of that matters. You know, I'm the author. I decide.
I love that quote. I wrote it down. I am the sole uncontested author of my life.
Yes.
How long, Jean, do we live as women? And I love this part of being a woman, but serving other people.
Oh, yeah. It's so ingrained in us. It is so deeply ingrained in us that our life is about service. I love people who make their lives about service, you know, men or women. But it's not what we have to do to be real women, you know? And it's not what we have to do for 60, 70, 80 years of our lives. You know, it's just not, but it's really ingrained. I mean, you know, I have not been in a relationship with a man, or anybody but a man, for 20 years. 20 years. And it's because I realized that the instinct in me to please and serve, to identify myself with his desires, his goals, was huge. I mean, when I went to law school at age 35, and with 2 kids, single mother, and when I went, I promptly fell in love, or at least in lust, with a fellow law student who was 11 years younger than I. And I was working 2 jobs, going to law school, studying, taking care of my kids. And he was there on his daddy's money, single, no children, no job. And I was typing his papers so that he could try out for law review. And that has nothing to do with him or his expectations. It had to do with me. You know, with me, with my deep, deep something from centuries of being female.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that interesting? And I think there's a fine line in my mind where I don't want to swing to being selfish and not caring about anybody's needs.
Agree.
But putting our needs back on the plate, or maybe for the first time, putting our needs on the plate, I think that's a valid kind of challenge that women in midlife struggle with.
I think so
I think
too.
women struggle with it in general. Maybe they don't struggle. Maybe I need to rephrase that. Women have this issue, and then they begin to struggle with it somewhere around midlife.
I think that's absolutely right. It's absolutely right. But it explains that for me, and this is just an individual choice.
Right.
It's why I'm not in a relationship, because frankly, I don't trust myself to protect myself.
Interesting.
In a relationship. Yeah, I haven't talked about that really with people, but that is how I see it. And I'm sure other women can deal with it just fine. You know, for me, that instinct to magnify my partner, you know, even if it meant diminishing myself, was very strong.
I struggle with that too.
Do you?
I really do. And I think that's where the tension in my journey comes from.
Yeah.
You know, it comes from being more concerned about other people's needs and state of mind than myself. And again, I want balance in that, you know, and I have taken some steps. And the funny thing is, Jean, it's not that My husband tells me no because he doesn't.
Right.
It's all an
It's
internal game.
It's an internal monitor.
Totally, completely.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, there's no one outside of me telling me I can't,
Right.
because inside of me, there's a dialogue that's happening, being worried about getting out of balance. But I'm already out of balance in some ways. So I feel like, that journey to success picture where it kind of looks like this and
Yeah.
not this. I feel
Yeah.
like that's life in general.
I agree. Yeah.
And so it's
And it would be
encouraging.
my hope that that's changing. It would be I have 6 granddaughters ranging
Oh,
from like 20 to 31.
uh-huh.
And I see their relationships are different, than ones I had. I see it. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
how to identify it, or I'm not around them enough, to really study it.
Yeah.
But I see a difference, and I'm hopeful that there will be. Otherwise, I'm stuck with that old country western song that says, "Live close by, visit often." That's how I would like a relationship with a man to be.
Oh gosh, I find that it's the human experience, right, Jean? Like in the perfect world, you could have it both ways all the time. But it's more of a marriage of those experiences, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. It's working it out. It's working out the intricacies of it, working out the balance of it for our lives. I would never want to give up that internal maternalistic something.
Yeah.
I would never want to give that up or have women give that up. I would love all women in power, for instance, to still have that there, because it's what makes them more human, more loving, you know?
Yeah. It's a superpower, really.
Yeah.
It is the ability to love and nurture and intuitively guide
Yeah.
people. Yeah. So tell me some of the things you've done after 50. So you modeled. What else did you
I
do?
did. I did. I became, well, the first, if you go back to I was 35, getting up to
Hmm.
50 is when I decided to go to law school and become a civil rights leader or attorney. And so during that period, being a civil rights attorney, that went up through my 50s, and I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I was in the Department of Education, so I got to work with kids with disabilities in public schools, the treatment of kids with disabilities in public schools. I helped write all the policies for intercollegiate athletics for women. Um, you know, just I got to do issues that I loved, that were wonderful. Lots of race issues. There were race issues everywhere in education.
Yeah.
I loved it. So when I retired at like 59, um, and I said I was open and ready for anything, I really was. So we wrote the books after I retired in my 50s. I did become a model, and which was really fun. At that time, I got a lot of modeling jobs because Medicare Part D was new on the horizon. And so they needed like pamphlets for CVS with me on the cover, telling how wonderful Medicare Part D was, or how you could get it. And got really interested. I did more commercials for like hospitals or hospital systems, where they would show me, this wasn't the question you asked, but they would show me with my pretend husband the day, and we'd be walking through the fruit market or vegetable market holding hands, or we'd be riding bikes on the beach, or we'd be all happy. And then they would give him a heart attack, and they would they would have me at the hospital looking sad. And the joke among my friends were, my God, she can't even keep a pretend husband. So, so I did that. And then, as I said, I moved to Florida and decided I continued modeling there. I did some for Disney. and I did face creams for the Home Shopping Network, for a German company that I loved. I still use their face creams. And what then? Then I ran for the office, and I fought. My little island that I lived on was suffering from tourism. I mean, it's the industry of Florida.
Yeah.
There's no income taxes because they have tourism. And so they will exploit any opportunity. So there was my little laid back tiny island that the developers found and the state and county found as a possible bank, and started tearing down all little beach houses, building great big big 10-bedroom houses to pack in as many short-term rentals as possible. So I just took it on, then horrified all my fellow city commissioners, attacking our building department, which was in league with so I got in trouble and I got myself sued and whatever. And then when I was done with that, and I knew that my beautiful little island called Anna Maria Island, in case anyone's ever been there, off the west coast of Florida, was doomed. Money talks.
Yeah.
Was doomed, and I was simply a postponing the inevitable, delaying the inevitable.
Right.
That was my job, to delay it. And when it reached a point where I knew, I had no more to give. I tell you what also got interesting. I was in my very early mid 60s, early 60s. And we had a mayor who was an Italian stallion. He was handsome and full of personality and a dreamer, and sexist. And so I went one day as a commissioner, to talk to him about some idea I had. I don't remember what it was, having to do with traffic on the island or something, and having boats come over instead of all the cars, and banning cars or whatever it was. So I outlined this thing I had really thought through, and he sat and he listened and he smiled, and then he said, "Oh, that's really interesting. So how was Christmas? Did you get to see your grandchildren?" And I thought, I'm old. He just declared me old. In his brain, I'm old.
Mm.
He doesn't need to listen to me. He doesn't
Wow.
care to listen to me. That's what happens in the 60s, the late 60s, is that you either, and at that point, so I decided to leave the island and go find my mountain home. But at that point, you have to say, I'm going to accept this or not accept this judgment, or I'm going to hear him and recognize I'm going to have an issue in the future with this perspective of me. And how am I going to deal with it? I'm babbling. Sorry.
No, that is such a profound thought that, in that moment, you had the presence of mind to recognize that there was a mindset. You were coming up against
Yep.
a mindset. Now, it could be uniquely his or that type of personality.
Yes.
Italian
stallions.
Could be. They might all just see things that way.
Right.
But you're right. How do we not take on that cloak?
Yes.
Right? Take on that judgment, take on that thing that we pick up on.
There were choices of how I could have received that.
Mm-hmm.
I could have gotten depressed about it and thought, what's the point? I can't be persuasive anymore. I can't, get my ideas across. What's the point? Or I could have been offended, insulted, and gotten into a verbal whatever with him. And I really just decided to say, oh, that's how he sees me.
Mm.
Oh, so now I'm aware, and I might recognize it and to make thoughts about how to deal with it.
Mm.
In his case, I just said, thanks for the meeting. See ya. Because there was no point.
There's a need for a certain level of confidence.
Yes.
Again, not caring what other people think. You might be in that reality, right? But that doesn't mean It has to change you, your drive, your dreams. It's that pivot. You pivoted.
Yep. Yes.
I mean, some people could stay and fight, I suppose, but that's a choice. And what do we do, Jean, with the precious time that we have?
You know, I think we have to have purpose.
Yeah.
I think we have to wake up every morning for a reason. When I first moved here to the village, I was very cautious about meeting people because I didn't want to glom on to people or friends who, turn out to be horror shows or something. I didn't want to too quickly.
Being careful.
Yeah, exactly. And I got really tired I thought I was really retired this time. I was just going to go live in my little house and play bridge and do whatever. And all of a sudden I got so tired of Taco Tuesday trivia. That
like, I can't take another day.
I cannot take another Taco Trivia Tuesday. I cannot do it. So I started to write a book, because in my life, really, I need a reason to get up in the morning. I don't mean I'll be depressed if I don't, but I know if I'm not actively pursuing something, whether it's supporting a political candidate or starting an orphanage or anything, usually needs to be sort of giving. I'm bored out of my mind.
Yeah.
And boredom leads to a low-level depression. And I don't want to be there.
And a lower quality of life because there's no vibrancy to your days.
Right. I've also sort of taken on, I want to tell you, the pulmonologists of the world, because I have a condition, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD.
Yes.
Thank you, all those years I smoked, right?
My mom has that too.
Entirely my responsibility. I created it. So, but what I have discovered is that if you have a chronic condition, doctors are really not very interested in you.
Right.
They're just not interested. They can't fix you. They can't cure you. So I decided, and I was right in the suffering. I have it. It's doing me in. The years before I came here, I was in the hospital twice a year with exacerbations, and I thought, I'm doomed. Hear me, doomed. And then I really got tired of it, and I really started doing, I sound like a keyboard warrior, research, and thinking about it, and then asking questions of the pulmonologists who have the personalities of this table I'm sitting at, who aren't interested. But I'm saying this is a progressive disease. I keep asking him, how can I improve it? How can I improve? I understand what you're describing to me, the nature of the disease, but I want to know how I can improve while I have it. And they aren't very interested. But I've created, I haven't been in the hospital in 2 years. I am healthy. I have increased my lung capacity from 61 to 71%, which is unheard of. But it's, because this is all goes to say that's part of why I get up in the morning. I get up in the morning to write. I get up in the morning to walk, because I want to prove those people wrong.
It's funny, having been the medical advocate for my mother-in-law, and my mom has good doctors. I don't have a lot of advocacy to do for her. Good. I'm advocating to her how to keep her healthy. Yes, she gets tired, but that mindset piece is so important at every stage of life. But I think as we mature and as the world's views begin to be less encouraging,
right,
we have to set our minds to what we know to be true about ourselves and our abilities, and fly in the face of all of that commentary.
when we used to go around, hawking our books, we would always start out by saying, look, we're at a stage and an age where our bodies are sagging, dragging, bagging, falling down, falling out. Our uteruses fall out. And this is what's happening. My sinuses are sagging, for God's sake. Everything is sagging. And not to speak of, other areas of our bodies. And then we'd say, and it also can be the most productive time of our lives. One NPR reviewer who interviewed us said, so what you're experiencing is postmenopausal zest. I said, okay, I'll take that. Okay. Isn't that funny?
I like that. Postmenopausal zest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Jean, we have spent 50 minutes together.
Oh, really? Oh my
already.
God,
can you believe it? I know. Every time. I think you and I could probably sit over a cup of coffee and talk for hours.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
I don't know. Maybe I need to come to North Carolina and take up 10 square feet of your house.
Yes, you certainly would be welcome.
So, Jean, I would love to have you, off the top of your head, if you could encourage my tribe in this season of life, moving toward, becoming more and more mature, and in a world where it's still not that attractive or that acceptable, what would you want them to know? Or how could you encourage them to shift their perspective if it needs to be shifted into this season?
I know I probably should have a pithy little answer here, and I really don't. What I want to say is work on yourself. Get a good counselor, therapist, life coach, whatever you want to call them. Get a good one and talk about what you want at this time of your life and how you can get it. I mean, if you haven't done that work beforehand, do it now. It's really important that you do it now to get support. I'm always a fan of getting support for what you're up to, enrolling others in your vision. So I think that's critically important. And to be able to, I would advise them to nurture the ability to step back. It's almost like stepping behind yourself and seeing yourself in the world. Who are you? How do you operate? How do others see you? Doing that can free you to live your full self, your full life. That's all I know.
That is fantastic. Well, Jean, I want to thank you so much for bringing your energy, your life, your vibrancy, just your mindset. You're such a joy to spend time with, and I'm inspired by the life that you have lived, that you continue to live, that your mindset is so refreshing, and I'm so grateful that I had this time with you today.
Thank you. As I told you before, I love your mission. I love what you're up to, so I really wish you well.
Thank you so much. Friends, today I've been talking with Jean Peelen. She is the co-author of 2 books. You can find the notes at www.feminineroadmap.com/episode 289. Or if you're on YouTube, those links will be below. Today, this conversation has been had because I believe in our ability as women to continue to contribute, to change, to impact the world, no matter what our age is. As a matter of fact, because of our age and our life experience, I believe we have the greater ability to do things that are impactful in our own lives and in the lives of the world around us. Because as you and I, as women, step up after a certain age and live in a way that taps into the resources that we are, man, this world is going to be so much better of a place. So I want to thank you so much for being with us today. I look forward to sharing more and more inspirational people and tips and strategies in the weeks to come. Please don't forget to subscribe, share, and save this page so you can come back and be encouraged. Thank you so much, my friends. Take care and have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.